think about today, the communication landscape, as I call it, has changed quite a bit. So first of all, we're dealing with a much more diverse culture than we once were, and we're more open to that and accepting of that. But in order to be open and accepting, we need to give thought to those different cultures, their beliefs and their norms. Also, we're surrounded with communication noise, right? I'll admit, mine's over there, but every one of us has a little smartphone that we carry around and we're constantly looking at. And that in itself has created noise in our lives because there's always information coming to us that we need to be able to deal with, or at least we feel we need to deal with it in the moment. The third thing is that as individuals, we have the ability now to reconnect and maintain long-lasting relationships. And the example I'll give you is Facebook. I'll admit it was about 1.5 years ago when I first joined Facebook, but I had people from high school, from public school, reaching out and connecting with me that I'd even thought about them. I didn't even know they existed. I see some of you smiling, right? So we're building these extensive networks of relationships electronically. But along that same regard, what I'll say is that relationships today aren't quite as strong as they once were. Because we're building these vast networks of relationships, I find, especially through technology, they're not as meaningful. We don't have as deep a discussion. It's pretty hard to get to the core of things when you're texting somebody, right? And I guess the last thing I'll say that's really changed is that communications travel much faster than they used to, right? So going back to thinking about technology, if somebody comes into the YMCA and for whatever reason has a bad experience, might have nothing to do with you. They can go back to their house. They can do it right in the moment with a smartphone and tell everybody they know about it and pass that message along. And that's a little bit scary. So communications today is much different than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. And in order to be effective in reaching out, connecting, and engaging others, we need to be conscious of that. So what I guess the most important thing I'd like you to take away today is that connection doesn't require words. Doesn't require a lot of effort, definitely doesn't require money. It requires you just have a little bit of initiation to do so, to reach out, to smile. And admittedly, I'm the same as most of you. I don't think enough about that. Now, when we're thinking then about engaging others, connecting, inspiring with them, there's really 4 points that I want to talk to you about this morning that I want to drive home, okay? So, the first is, engagement requires that you give some thought to your message. Now, when you think about engagement, there's several factors, and I look at engagement as really the opening, the starting of a communication, okay? And there's several factors that influence. So, if you think about it this way, think about an onion, okay? So an onion, if you take it in its whole form, not much use. The only thing you can really do with it is tie it around your neck and try and ward off evil spirits, right? But if you take that crumbly, yellow, orangey colored shell off it, now it might have a use. You can maybe throw it in a roasting pot with something, right? If I peel back that shell, I think the next thing I get is typically a green colored shell. Now, again, that's of use. I could chop that up and maybe put it into a salad. If I peel that back and then I get that slimy layer that's on the onion off, now it's of more use for maybe a hamburger, a sandwich, right? So that onion has several purposes. But the more I peel away, the higher the quality of that onion. And that's really what communication about building communities is all about. That each layer has a purpose, but the more you peel away, the more you think about peeling away, and how you do that is actually how you will engage others. So, first of all, think about the different demographics that exist. We talked earlier about culture. There are cultural norms that we need to be conscious of, just in our everyday lives. And they can be very simple. First of all, think about others and think about space, personal space. Typically, I like 1 foot to 2 feet from somebody and I'm comfortable. But in different cultures, that's very different. Some cultures like more space, some less. If you think about different meanings of different words in cultures. I had a gentleman that I worked with, and he actually traveled the world and worked with companies all over to audit them in different areas. So he was told by a client in the United States, I'd like you to go to Japan, I'd like you to audit our supplier on these things. So he said, okay, no problem. He called a gentleman in Japan, they had a discussion, and he explained everything he needed. So when I show up, I'm going to need all this documentation and information and people. And the gentleman on the other end of the phone just kept saying, hi, hi. So when he hung up the phone, he really thought, I don't think he understood what I need. I'm going to go there. This is going to take a long time. So he traveled over to Japan, met the gentleman, and when he went into the gentleman's office, he had everything laid out he asked for, absolutely everything. So he asked him, he said, you know, when we talked on the phone, you never really confirmed anything. You just kept saying hi. I thought you were really just continuing to greet me. And he said, no, in Japanese, hi means yes. Right? And my friend never bothered to grab Google and figure that out. But on a day-to-day basis, we're dealing with a variety of cultures, and even the simplest things we need to give some thought to make sure we're communicating effectively. Because if you can't communicate effectively, you'll never engage with others. The last thing I guess I'll mention is that you need to also consider that beliefs, values, norms of different cultures are different than maybe your own. Last weekend, our neighbors, their son and daughter-in-law were home. So my wife walked over, said hello, said, hey, you're up this weekend from, I don't know where they live. And she said, you know, what are you up here for? She said, well, this weekend is Korean Thanksgiving. My wife said, oh, I didn't know that. So are you coming up next weekend for the Canadian, I guess, Thanksgiving? And she said, no, because I'm Korean, but I was born in the United States. So we actually have the United States Thanksgiving. We don't practice the Canadian. We mix the two of them together. I never would have guessed that, unless my wife didn't approach the conversation and learn. So when you're dealing with different cultures, and we all are, you need to give thought to this. The second thing you need to consider when you're dealing with other people, and when you're engaging with them, is the different generations. Okay? You look around this room today, we've got a variety of individuals, all from different generations. But the key is, in how those generations communicate with each other, their preferences are different. So, for example, and I'm sure you've heard this before, traditionalists, the easiest way to think about those for myself, traditionalists would have been my grandparents. Okay? Best way to communicate with a traditionalist is face-to-face. Right? Second best is telephone, but even telephone's risky. I remember as a child, when I really started answering the telephone, my grandfather called one time, and he was asking me, are you guys coming over for dinner? I said, yes, Grandpa, we'll be there. He says, okay, click. So, oh my gosh, I must have hung up on Grandpa. I ran up to my mom. I said, something happened. I hung up on Grandpa. She said, oh, no, he never says goodbye on the phone. And that was just part of his era, right? Telephones, believe it or not, were brought out when he was young. So communicating face-to-face was the best way to do that. Now, if you think about the baby boomers, and I think they've retitled themselves the Zoomers nowadays, right? A little bit different. Technologically savvy, but I guess for myself, I relate it to my parents. If I want to communicate with my parents, the best way for me to do so is a face-to-face discussion. Second best is telephone. Third is technology. My father, God bless him, loves technology for sending me jokes. We get about 4 to 5 a day every day. If I send them an email, I'll likely either get a phone call or no response at all. So I know when I'm communicating with them that I have to go face-to-face or possibly telephone. But I also need to measure the fact that face-to-face will involve at least an hour and likely a meal, right? And telephone will involve a 20-minute conversation where I'll probably have to hand it over to my wife, okay? So again, when I'm dealing with that generation, I have to be conscious of that. Now next are Generation X, which I guess technically I belong to. Key style of communication for Generation X is what? Anybody know? Email, right? Electronic. I was born in the email generation. I email everything. I've worked in companies where there's been a lot of Generation X, which is typically around the, I guess, 64 to 82 is when you were born. But what they end up doing is everything's put on email in that case, right? So that's my preferential style. I'm sure you find the same. Again, this generation, though, is very direct with their discussions, very open, okay? And the last one I'll talk about, although there's more, is really the millennials, the Gen Y. They're between, I guess, 83 and 2000 is when they were born. But that generation, again, very different. Completely involved in electronic technology, right, in how they communicate. And most of it is texting. I'll tell you, I haven't texted a lot, but when I was, I guess about maybe a year ago, not that long ago, I was seeing text, I was seeing stuff on Facebook, right? I told you I joined Facebook. And I saw the LOL. So I said to my wife one day, somebody sent a message to her on Facebook and it said LOL. And I said, you know, I don't know why people put that in. And she says, well, what do you think it means? I said, well, it means lots of luck. She said, no, you ding-dong, it means laugh out loud. I mean, who thought of that, right? But I find in my business and people I deal with and younger generation, they text me. It was shocking the first time I had a client send me a text. I thought, what is this? But thinking again about different generations and how they prefer to communicate, because that's how you're going to be able to engage and build a relationship. You can't communicate in just the manner that you want. You have to think about the other people you're connecting with. So a message may be best sent, if you're dealing with a group such as yourself, may be best sent verbally as well as electronically in some form, right? Now, the last thing I want to mention here, if we're thinking about engaging, is that there's 3 different behavioral styles, right? This is kind of the last layer I'll talk about in this section, but there's 3 different behavioral styles that we all tend to, 4, that we all tend to lean towards. So, just quickly, I'll go through them. The first are the relators, okay? So those are the people that yearn for connection and relationship. They want to relate to others. Now, admittedly, are there any relators in the crowd? You got a few, okay. You know what the relators are doing? They're looking around for others. Oh, there's another relator. There's another one. Okay. Now, the second style I'll mention is the social style. Those are the people that like to be out, like to connect. They're probably the people that went to bed just an hour before they get up this morning, right? They want to connect with other people. Socializers. The third are the thinkers. Now, I won't ask you to raise your hand because the thinkers aren't quite sure if they're a thinker or not. Right? And the last, and I'll admit it, okay, I'm one of them, controller. Decisive to the point. Okay? Now, there's a whole bunch of science behind this. We can have more than one style, right? But the key is that we all tend to lean towards one style or the other. Okay? So, when I'm thinking about yourselves, I'm thinking, okay, well, how does this really affect? Because it's easy if you're dealing with another person, you have a little bit of a discussion with them to figure out what style they might be. But if you're dealing with a group of people, right, how do you really figure out the style? Well, let me give you an example that I think you'll agree with. If I was running an exercise class, who, from a personality style standpoint, is going to attend? Won't be the controller, because he'll be working out on his own or with a personal trainer, because he likes to be in control. Right? Won't be the thinker, because they're not sure if they should exercise or not. Right? Likely going to be the socializer, because people who get into groups like that like to socialize. They like to meet other people. Possibly the relators, and you'll know them because they came with a friend, or someone told them they should attend. So you can see how even thinking about a group of people, if you actually give it thought, you can kind of identify their typical personality styles. And the key is when you understand that style, then you know how better to deal with it. And I'll give you an example of that. I am, as I said, admittedly more of a controller. Okay? My wife, she won't admit it because she's not sure yet, is a thinker. Okay? So back in early summer, I was going to speak in Moncton, New Brunswick. And so what I ended up doing was I said, okay, to my wife, I gave it a few quick thoughts, and I thought, well, I could take the family, we could go for a week, we'll get a cottage, be by the water, be fun, we'll go. I mean, that was really the thought process I went through. So I came up and told my wife this. Okay, well, she needed time, right? She had to think this through. And I know that. I know that from her style. So I gave this to her well in advance. I said, no problem. You figure out where you want to stay, where you want to go, right? The place, I don't care. Here's where I need to be at this time. Everything else, you figure it out. And she loved that. She researched. And then about a week later, she presented me options. Here's what I've come up with. Here's the different places. And I've looked at all these factors. And I've gone on to look at ratings people have given to these places. I never even would have thought of that, right? So if you understand the style of other people, or you understand the general style of a group, and you understand the style of yourself, which isn't hard to do, we've done that this morning, you can better understand how to position your discussions, how to connect, and how to communicate with these people. A couple other points I just want to make. The second main point, I guess I'll say today, is that when connecting with others, you not only have to be aware then of your own communication style, but you have to be flexible in your style. If you recognize your style, you have to be willing to be flexible in how you're dealing with others, which again means giving thought, right? Thinking about the discussion you're having, what you're about to say, or navigating in the moment. So, if, for example, when you're communicating, you need to be watching for cues from other people, okay? And there's a couple main ones that you've probably thought of before. The first is if I'm in a telephone discussion, okay, a verbal discussion with somebody, I can pick up on their tones, right? So if somebody says to me, Shawn, great job, Okay, that's positive. They say, Shawn, great job, right? Not so positive. So you can pick up on changes in the tones of people's voices that suggest that they're not happy with your communication or they're not understanding what you're saying. Now, from the other side of the coin, when you're communicating in written form, the same kind of thing. So for those of you who use email a lot, use writing a lot, you can inject emotion into those conversations, into those communications by using emoticons, right? You've used those before, little happy faces. You can use exclamation points. Try not to use capitals. It means you're yelling unless you're really excited, right? So if you think about communications from the simplest form, how you position your communications can suggest emotion and can drive your point home. And the cues that you receive back allow you to determine how well it's being received. You can't be afraid, as well, to check for an understanding. A lot of us, so picture today, okay? I could get up here and I could sit and very quickly ramble everything off to you just to get off the stage. But what I'm watching for as I'm talking to you are people nodding, people potentially yawning, people looking down at their iPhone or BlackBerry. But it's giving me a sense of the audience. If I see most of you are looking at me and or nodding, it suggests that I'm making sense. But if it wasn't, if I came into this room, you were all looking down, checking your iPhones, whatever the case might be, I would say to you, you know what? I'm getting the feeling what I'm saying doesn't make sense to you. Right? It's as simple as that. But we don't do that enough. If we pick up cues from other people, we rarely stop in the moment and say, you know what, I'm getting the feeling maybe I've given you too much information. I'm getting the feeling that this doesn't make sense to you. Or, does this make sense to you so far? It's as simple as that. Because again, that's being in the moment of your conversation. And that is how you connect with people. You have to also be nimble in your communications. You have to be able to move around, to change your style. If you notice cues, things are going one way or another, or you sense, you know what, I thought they're a thinker, I think they're more of a controller, you have to be willing to change your own style. Okay, and that's really being nimble. Remember that people retain information, right? I'm sending a communication, you're receiving it. But how you receive it effectively is different for everybody. You've got the auditory people, right? They like to hear it. You've got the kinesthetic people. They want to touch it. And then you've got the visual people. They have to see it to believe it. You know, for myself, I'm kinesthetic. If I sit and somebody's trying to tell me something, school for me was horrible. Because I would go into class, I would listen, and it would put me to sleep. I would go home and try and read the chapter, and my mind was everywhere but on the page. So for me, I had to do it. If I wanted to memorize something, I wrote the whole thing out. That's the only way it would stick in my mind. So you have to remember that of your audience. If you're not flexible in how you communicate with others, if you're not nimble, you're not able to move around and be flexible, you virtually eliminate the chance of you truly being heard, and you eliminate the chance of making a connection with the other person. If you think about communications, I'll just tell you something quickly here. Even the simplest message can get skewed. I travel quite a bit. I spend a lot of time in hotels. I think I've been in a hotel at least 3 days a week for the last 3 weeks. So in doing so, what I often do if I'm going to stay for any period of time, I bring my own soap. Okay? The other soap dries out your skin. I don't want that. So, I was in a hotel about 6 months ago, had my own bar of soap. I think it was Dial soap. And I go in and there was 3 bars of soap in this hotel room. One at the sink, one in the shower, one in the basket on the top of the toilet. Okay? So that night I thought, well, be courteous. I left a note for the maid. Dear maid, I don't really need these bars of soap. Feel free to take them back. And I stacked them beside the note thinking she'll see this. I come back to my room that night, guess what? 3 new bars of soap. 3 that I left there with my note, 1 at the sink, 1 in the shower, 1 in the basket above the toilet. So, okay. So I called the front desk. I said, I left a note for the maid. You're dropping off bars of soap. No sense wasting your money. I don't need them. Okay? So if you don't mind passing on the message to the maid, you can take these bars of soap. I have my own. No problem, Mr. Casemore will take care of it. Come back to my room the next night, guess what? 3 new bars of soap. I'd stacked all 6 up. Now there's 1 at the sink, 1 at the shower, 1 in the basket above the toilet. So I said, okay. So I thought if I went out to the front desk to complain, but what happens at the front desk, right? People are constantly changing. So I said, okay, I'm going to leave a message for the housemaid, the head maid, to see if this will get through. So I leave her a message. It's Mr. Casemore, room 201. I've brought my own soap. You keep dropping off several bars every day. I don't need them. No sense wasting your money. If you could do me a favor and have the maid remove the soap from my room, I'd appreciate it. I get back the next night. There's a note on my corner of my bed from the head maid. Mr. Casemore, received your message. Sorry for any inconvenience. We've removed the soap from your room. Let me know if you need anything else. I go into the room. into the bathroom. There's no soap. Not even my dial. It's gone. Nothing. Okay. I go back out to the front desk, try to explain my situation to the person there, but with that individual, guess what? It's somebody new again, so they have no idea what I'm talking about. I buy a little bar of soap. I go back to my room. I leave a message for the housemaid. I said, it's Mr. Casemore calling in from 201. I asked if you could remove the small bars of soap from my room. You've done that, but you've also taken my bar of dial. If you could do me a favor, I'd like my soap back, please. Thank you. Next night, come back to the room. Okay? 15 little bars of soap. No dial. And there's a note. It says, Mr. Casemore, I'm confused by the message you're sending us. You asked for us to remove the soap from your room, and we did so. I've replaced the soap in hopes this will satisfy you. By the way, we don't stock dial. I'm not sure what you're asking for. The simplest communication, if not handled correctly, right, gets misconstrued. It's not understood. In that case, there was varying parties, and I didn't use enough different methods to make sure my message was clear. So that's how quickly the communications and how we connect and engage others can be put off track. Now, third point I want to make to you this morning. Engagement and connection is really being driven rapidly by technology. We talked about that earlier. But as a result of technology, what's happened is that there's increased value in human interaction. I want to say that again. Because of technology, there's increased value in human interaction. Now, think about this for a second. What of the companies that you can think of that really haven't recognized this yet? Think about, anybody ever called Belle? Yeah, Emily. I could just strangle Emily, right? Can't get by her. If I yell at her, if I hit zero, it doesn't matter. She won't let me by. But on the contrary, there are organizations who've recognized there's a lot of power in human interaction. Anybody here ever go to Walmart? What's the first and last thing you see when you enter and exit? The greeter, yeah. They're always happy. Welcome to Walmart. Can I get you a cart? Do you want a hand with that? Whatever the case is when you leave, thanks for coming to Walmart. Now, something so simple. And you think about it from a corporation standpoint. Why would you pay somebody to do that? Nobody else does that, but that's the key. Nobody else does that. And really, regardless of your circumstances while you're at Walmart, that person has a chance as you leave that if you actually tell them you had a problem, they could try and resolve it. Personal human interaction has power. And that's where you're in a good position because you are about connecting with people. But you need to use that, right, to your benefit. So, if we want to think about how can I use, so if I'm going to interact with people, let's say I'm a leader of others in the Y, and I don't actually spend a lot of time interacting with the public, with members, with volunteers. Let's just say that's the situation. Then you've got very little time to inject personal interaction, and the question is, how do you do that to be of benefit? Here's 3 quick questions, 3 quick things you can think of to make sure you're providing value in that interaction. First of all, where is the injection of my interaction most meaningful? Right? So if on a day-to-day basis you've got meetings, you've got things going on, is there some place you can inject yourself that would be a benefit to members, to volunteers that you're not doing today? The second thing, what can you provide that would have significant meaning for the members or staff? So when you inject yourself, what can you actually do that'll provide value, that'll make others appreciate you spending the time in doing so? And the third, how can you ensure that not only is this valuable for others, but it's valuable for yourself in learning? Because in how you communicate and connect with others requires you to collect information from those other people, whether they be staff, volunteers, members, right? If you don't learn about them, how are you ever going to engage with them and inspire them? For myself, I do some teaching, okay? And one of my largest classes is 60 students. Of mostly foreign denomination. They come to Toronto. I teach at Humber College, I'm proud to say, as an adjunct professor. And what happens is they come from other countries all over the world to take this program, and I teach in the program. So what I do is this. At the start of the program, I spend probably half that first class connecting with people. A quick 60-minute spiel from everybody, who you are, why you're here, and what you want to learn. Okay? That's the start. At the end of the program, I do the same thing. I spend half the class saying, so what did you enjoy, what didn't you enjoy, and what are you going to do next with that information? And then throughout that semester, I'm making sure I'm touching each and every one of those people some way, even if it's only once. Stopping by and saying, hey, do you have any questions with that? Nice to see you again. Responding to emails, whatever the case might be, I'm having some sort of interaction. And I'll be honest with you, that's quite hectic when you're trying to go through material and teach and keep everybody on the same page. But I make sure I do it, because that's how I'm connecting. Each and every one of you are in a position where you can actually engage with others. You're around people all the time, you just may not be engaging with them as much as you could. So, as we're almost done peeling the onion, let me ask you a question. Is all this overwhelming? Right? If you're in the moment and you're thinking about a communication, you really want to be going through a register, but the more you do that, the easier it gets. And these are all things I'm sure you've heard in the past, you've just maybe not given a lot of thought to. So, the last point I want to make is if you want to inspire others, you've connected, you've built a relationship, and you want to be inspirational, guess what? You have to be inspirational if you want to inspire. If you're walking around like this and it's, yeah, everything's pretty good, nice to meet you, right? That's not inspirational at all. So what I want to do is give you 5 quick points. I work with a lot of different associations, and what happens is the CEO, the executive director, they want to be inspirational to their members. They're the leader of that association. So I work with a lot of them to try and be inspirational, to develop that quality, and I wanted to give you today 5 of the tips that I work through with them, okay, to being inspirational. First of all, as we've already talked about, you have to be a good communicator. Right? You have to be able to get your message through to all different cultures, all different generations, and have them understand it in a way that's meaningful to them. But ensuring that your message still makes sense, and it still is delivered in the manner you intended it to be. Second, you have to be passionate about what you do. And I'll be honest with you, I had numerous jobs throughout my career, and about every year and a half I changed jobs or changed companies because I had no passion for it. What I'm doing now, I have passion. I'm up till midnight every night. I'm up with my boys throughout the night. I'm up at 5:30 in the morning. I go to the gym. I come home. I have breakfast. I travel 7 days a week, all the time. And I'm not going to burn out because I love what I do. That's passion. And each and every one of you have that. The third is you have to be collaborative. Okay? So myself, prior to starting my own company, I worked with a lot of organizations. I supervised, managed a lot of people, unionized, non-unionized, all sorts of age groups, you name it. But in my own demeanor, my personal style, typically being controlling, what I wanted to do is say, here's what you need to do, go do it. Right? That was what I tended to want to do. But I recognized that's not the way to get things done. You have to collaborate with other people. You have to accept their information, give it thought, and work with them to achieve the outcomes you want to achieve. So being inspirational means being collaborative with others. You have to also believe in yourself. You have to be confident in yourself and your abilities. Good news is, if you're missing some abilities, you have some weaknesses, you can learn them. You can develop those skills. But you have to have confidence in yourself, because if you don't, those around you won't have confidence in you. And you won't be inspirational. And the last is you have to be expressive. And by that I mean you have to be willing to be vocal, both about the positive, about your excitement, but also about the not so positive challenges you've encountered and how you overcome them. But you have to be expressive publicly with other people. So, we've talked about a lot of guidelines, rules, all of these different things that help you engage with others. Heck, we've talked about atmospheric pressure, right? There's a lot going on when you're trying to engage and connect with other people. But fortunately, as human beings, we're all prone to 3 significant attributes, okay? So as we're trying to do this, keep this in mind with those you're trying to engage with. Number 1, we're forgiving, right? If you're communicating with somebody, if you're trying to engage, you make a mistake, something comes out wrong, you can correct it. Just do it. Admit to it, move on. The second is, we can easily learn new skills. So if you think, you know what, I mean, I'll be honest with you, right now, I was never a good public speaker. Never. Hated it, dreaded it. Today I love it because I worked on the skill. I got in front of more and more people. I practiced. I'm still practicing and learning today. The third is that then, as I just suggested, practice makes perfect. So if there's a skill you want to develop, you want to be a better leader, you want to communicate with people in a better way, some way that's more meaningful, you can decide what you need to do to create that skill, and then you can practice that skill. Do it on people you know. I've got individuals that I talk to on a frequent basis, and what they do is they want to role play with me, meetings that they're having with people, right? They could be very serious meetings, and they want to practice. That's the way we learn a new skill. And we do that if we're considering our learning as external, okay? So just quickly, there's two ways to learn something. Either it's intrinsic and you believe you already know, or it's extrinsic and it's outside of you. And if you want to learn, you need to always consider your learning as extrinsic. Right? What happens as children, we learn from everything around us, but at some point we tend to shut down and say, I know it. Don't need to know it anymore. And that's false. Okay? So if you want to practice, become better at engaging, connecting with people, you need to look around you for new skills, new ways to do that, and practice them. In the simplest terms then, 3 things you can walk out of here today with is number 1, who are you attempting to connect with? Group, individual, doesn't matter. And how is your message going to be a benefit to them? The second thing, what is the message that you want to convey, and what is the most effective way to do so? And the third and last one is, how can you continue to provide value to this relationship and nurture it and grow it? Just like Betty did with me. She didn't jump out of the gate and try and discuss her life story with me. Our relationship progressed over time. Relationships progress over time, but by placing effort in building relationships, you can accelerate that. So, the last thing I'll mention to you, the number 1 thing you can do if you want to connect and engage with others and inspire them is be enthusiastic about what you do. And some days I know that's difficult, but you have to demonstrate that enthusiasm. So what I want you to do is this. I want to give you a little assignment. When you leave here today, before the end of the day, I want you to go out and connect with 3 people. Could be people you connected with earlier, could be somebody new. But pick somebody that you presume is different from yourself. Don't pick somebody the same age, the same height, the same sex, right? Pick somebody that's different. And take some of the things we've talked about, be in the moment, have a discussion, and build a relationship. Because if you don't recognize it now, life is about relationships. And for me, unfortunately, I learned that too late in life. But as you leave here, one of the most powerful things in these events is if you haven't met people in the past, now you have. Now you have reason to reach out to them, to talk to them, to discuss with them challenges you might have. So in this room, I told you about Betty and about the YMCA. You had a dramatic impact on my life. And maybe not you directly, but you indirectly. And you're having an impact today on other people's lives. You need to recognize this. This isn't a job that you're doing. You're affecting other people. So the way you can be the best you can be is to reach out, engage, connect, and inspire them using the things we've talked about today. Thank you very much.